Well, welcome today to the our webinar with Spire and with Biz Savers Alliance on how churches can reduce property liability and insurance costs. The reality of the expense of insurance is always one of the top budget line items in any church. And one of the things that I love about our partner with Business Savers Alliance and Inspire is it's very interesting. You look at major industries. Take, for example, the five largest sporting leagues in the United States. You look at NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, MLS. Collectively together, I'd be curious if anybody knows the answer. Drop it in the chat. Guess how much collective revenue those organizations do in those leagues altogether. I'll give you a hint. It's up into the billions, and they do a lot. In fact, it's $50 billion that those sporting leagues do. And so you see situations where, like, I'm coming to you from Missouri, and I'm kind of a little heartbroken right now because my Kansas City Chiefs are going to be leaving the Missouri side to go over to the Kansas side in a couple of years. Got a unreal deal, like $3 billion for a brand new stadium that they're not going to have to pay a penny for, and they get all of the revenue that happens in that facility. These sporting events and these leagues can leverage the collective buying power of that. But did you know that among all the churches in the United States and nonprofit organizations, there's in fact about $300 billion that come in the way of donations and of revenue from those sources. And yet, we nowhere near have the leveraging power of these bigger, larger organizations. And I think so much gets left on the table for churches when we don't leverage our collective might together. And so that's what organizations like Business Savers Alliance does. And for things, services that include like health insurance, but also like what we're talking today about property liability and insurance. So I'm really excited for you to be able to learn from an expert, because I am by no means an expert in property insurance, and that stuff is changing so fast. But today we have Bejorn Waldron, who leads the sales and marketing for the National Church Group Insurance. And so he's been doing it since 2012 and works directly with carriers, tracks the industry trends, and has helped so many different organizations. And NCG as a corporation has helped so many people. So I have no doubt, because I've learned a lot from him already, you're going to learn a ton today. And we're grateful that you took time to join us. And before I turn it over, I will let you know we're going to have a time of Q&A. So if you got a question that comes up, or maybe you're facing a very particular issue, I know we had some questions come in before on email of things that people are facing. Go ahead and drop those in the chat, and we'll be able to get to it. I'll serve those up to Bjorn, and we'll be able to answer your questions and help you however we can. So, well, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to your friend, and looking forward to what we have to learn today.
Thanks so much, Chaz. And yeah, we'll certainly have time for Q&A at the end. We'll be going through several different topics today. So if you have a question about anything as I'm going through, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm happy to stop and deal with it as we're on that topic. And Chaz, you can feel free to stop me anytime.
Gotcha.
So thank you for having me today. Let me share my screen here. Before I get started, I'll go ahead and address probably the most common question I get, and that's, why are you in the hayloft of a barn? Uh, this is my office here in downtown Leesburg, Virginia. Not a hayloft of a barn, but it is an old grain mill that we converted, not we, but they converted the building into an office. And so kind of an eclectic look, but anyway, this is my office, and as Chaz said, I'm with National Church Group. We are the insurance partner of Business Savers Alliance. Just give you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Founded in 1984 by a third generation pastor and church planter. We always have been and always will be dedicated to the church insurance market. So we are a church specific agency. We're independent, so we don't work for any specific company, but represent a number of different carriers that write the church insurance coverage. We do business in all 50 states, and we're focused on risk management. No matter how good an insurance policy is, you're still paying a lot of money for something that you hope to never use. So for that reason, we try and add a lot of value in other ways by helping our clients with risk management. So to kind of kick us off, I'd like to give just a general kind of state of the church insurance industry. Where do we find ourselves today as an industry and why? So let's talk about carrier performance. So these numbers, there's surveys done every year of the top 5 insurance carriers in the United States that insure churches, and the biggest number that kind of determines the health or the performance of an insurance carrier is called the combined ratio. Basically, that number shows if an insurance company is making money or if they're losing money. So, to kind of put this in perspective, a 100 combined ratio means you're breaking even. The money you're bringing in from premiums and the money you're paying out in claims and other expenses is even. So 100 is kind of the baseline. Anything below 100 means an insurance company is profitable, they're making money. Anything over 100 means they're losing money. So back in 2021, the industry was at 99.74. So just below 100, they're doing good, they're making money. I don't have the 22 numbers in there, but 22 and 23 were bad years for the industry. That's when we had some of those nationwide kind of deep freeze events. We had other weather events, hurricanes, wildfires, and other things that contributed to a lot of losses in the church insurance industry. So by the end of 23, the industry was at 124 combined ratio. After that, things started to stabilize a little bit. So 24 and 25, the number continued to come down. So at the end of last year, the industry was pretty much even again. So they were kind of right back on track with where they wanted to be. Um, the end of 23, when things got really bad, that's when we started to see carriers making some of those big decisions that I'm sure affected maybe many of your churches out there. A lot of non-renewals were going out, a lot of policies were being canceled, and a reason for that is obviously an insurance carrier has an obligation to their shareholders, their owners, to make money, but a lot of the decisions were driven by AM Best, and AM Best is the rating company that determines an insurance company's financial rating. So usually when AM Best tells an insurance carrier, "Hey, you need to do this, you need to do that," they listen. So AM Best was pushing a lot of these carriers to diversify their client base, to non-renew a lot of their client base, and so that's what a lot of what trickled down to the individual churches. Some of the inherent challenges in church insurance that led to those high combined ratios. Churches have a lot of old buildings. A lot of those old buildings have a lot of deferred maintenance. Churches aren't exactly known for being flush with cash to, update these expensive aging buildings. So those led to a lot of claims. Like I mentioned before, the weather patterns, coastal concerns, hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, wind, freezing. Those also led to a lot of, burst pipes and everything that resulted in claims. And then on the liability side, some nuclear verdicts. So a number of states, I'll talk about this in detail a little more later, but a lot of the states opened up the statute of limitations for bringing um, like abuse claims. And so a lot of those claims ended in some really, really high verdicts that insurance companies had to pay out. So after all that doom and gloom, there is good news. Praise Jesus. Rate increases are slowing. We've seen that consistently the last couple years, that those high rate increases that we had seen in 22, 23, they're starting to back down to normal levels now. Underwriting restrictions are loosening. So, a lot of carriers drew some pretty hard lines in the sand the last few years as far as we're not going to insure anything 100 miles from the coast or any different scenarios like that. Well, a lot of those decisions are being loosened now. Coverage is more readily available. There was, a lot of situations for a couple of years there where, a church maybe had a couple bad claims, and then they literally couldn't find insurance coverage in the market. No one was willing to insure them. We're starting to see that change now, where even if there's been a couple bad claim years, we can still find a home, so to speak, for their coverage. And the underwriting community is responding positively to risk management. So part of our job as an agency is to advocate for our clients and relay to the insurance carriers what they're doing to be proactive about risk management. And underwriters are responding positively to that with both coverage and rate considerations. So things like upkeeping your building property, doing things to make the building and grounds more safe, that's being recognized by the insurance carriers. Next, I want to talk about one of the big risk issues for churches that often gets overlooked, and that's cyber insurance. So just real quickly, I'll just give kind of a brief overview of what it is, what it's intended to cover, and like I said, it's often overlooked. And one of the I guess comments that I get a lot is, well, we use a third party vendor for our giving platform, so we're not storing any of that credit card data in-house. So don't really see why we should need cyber insurance. And that's great because that does reduce your liability. But there's a lot of other areas where cyber insurance can come into play. And so cyber insurance is typically divided into two parts. There's the first party coverage and the third party coverage. The first party is coverage for the church's direct loss. So things like funds transfer fraud or computer fraud. Like, for example, if someone were to impersonate a pastor's email address and ask for $5,000 to be transferred, to a specific fund, and turns out it was a hacker, that kind of thing. And also coverage for business interruption or extra expense if, systems are down and you have lost revenue because of that. The first party coverage usually provides for recovery of digital data that may be stolen or compromised, and then extortion or ransomware coverage as well. Some of the third party areas of coverage would be media liability. So 99.9% of churches are going to have either a website or social media or both. And so, for example, if something were to be posted on there without permission, could result in a lawsuit, and that's what the media liability is intended to cover. Also, privacy and network security. There could be regulatory fines and penalties if data is compromised, and then that payment card loss. If there's credit card data that is compromised or stolen, that's what that third party coverage is kind of intended to cover. Next, I'd like to talk about some of the cost drivers that are driving the higher premiums that we've seen in the church insurance industries, and then talk about some practical ways that churches can help lower those costs. So some of the factors driving costs, like for example, for a specific church, why would their insurance premium be higher than another church? Well, one of the main ways is the claims history. I hear it from a lot of carriers that the best predictor of future claims is past claims. So if a carrier is looking at a claims history and there's been 7 claims in the last 3 to 5 years, they're going to factor that into the price. So yeah, if you've shopped your insurance in the last few years, the first thing that they'll usually ask for is your 5-year claims history with your carrier, because that's one of the main rating factors that they use. Another factor is risk exposure. So whether there's certain weather elements that you're exposed to, be it wildfire, tornado, wind, could be the crime score in your particular area. Those are all factored in. And then market conditions. So, as I mentioned before, the industry as a whole, how good or how bad they're doing has a direct effect on the premiums that they're charging to their clients. So even though it may not necessarily be fair that a deep freeze event in Texas raises the insurance premiums in Virginia, that's kind of how it works, because insurance at its core is kind of the spread of risk across a number of different organizations. So it all has kind of a trickle down effect. Some practical strategies to mitigate these costs. So, as I mentioned before, proactive building and grounds care. This directly affects the insurance premium. So, if you have, say, a roof on your church that has a 25-year expected lifespan and it's at year 32, that's going to be factored into the cost. If you replace your roof and you got a brand new roof, that's going to be factored into the cost. So that's gonna lower your premium. Um, Certainly things like if you have a tree branch hanging over the roof, trimming that tree branch, you have a crack in the sidewalk that's a trip hazard, fixing that crack. Doing those things are all things that underwriters at a carrier would look at and say, this is a well-run operation. I'm gonna give some credit on the premium for this. And then physical security measures, security systems, security cameras, sprinklers in the building, fire alarms, all of those things are things which carriers add credit to lower the premium. And then also on the liability side, robust risk management procedures. So having having solid policies and plans for abuse prevention, having solid plans for employment issues, money handling, those things all help reduce your liability as a church, and in turn can reduce your premium from the carrier. But doing these things only matters if the insurance company knows about it. I mean, it matters anyway. It always matters, but it matters on your premium if the insurance company knows about it. So make sure to tell your agent about these things so that they can relay that to the carrier. And again, help paint that picture to the carrier that this is a well-run operation. They're doing things to reduce their risk and reduce their exposure, and should be rewarded as thus in their premium. And also, just kind of to drive the point home, risk management is increasingly important from an insurance carrier's eyes in cost reduction. Um, Insurance carriers they'll be able to know what a well-run church is and what one that is just, paying their premiums and trying to get by. So helping to paint that picture goes a long way. All right, next I want to talk about another big risk issue with churches, and that's safety and security teams. This is another area that I get a lot of questions on, and something that most, if not all, churches have at least thought about. And a lot of churches come to me and just don't know where to start. Like, what do we even do to start a security team? So I'll talk a little bit about this. First thing to do is identify a leader or leaders and the team members. So obviously, anyone with military or law enforcement background is a great person to have on the team because they already have that safety and security mindset. And then the leader can help recruit team members for the team and develop protocols for the team. Items to consider for the security team. Will they be armed? Will they be unarmed? What are the insurance ramifications of that? I will say that some carriers will run for the hills from an armed security team. Some carriers like it. They see it as making the church more safe. So it's really case by case, carrier by carrier, how they view that. And then the legal ramifications. What are the laws in your specific state regarding armed security teams? And how do they look on that? And then development of procedures and plans. So, just having someone with a gun stand by the door isn't really a security plan. So certainly have a robust plan, train the team to the plan, and then figure out the items that are needed to support that plan. So walkie-talkies, so the team can communicate, maybe vests, AEDs at the church, those kind of things that would help the team execute their plan. And then, like I said, have a procedure manual and train the team to the manual. It's all been done before, so there's plenty of sample policies out there that can easily be tailored for any church's situation. Okay, I touched on this earlier. I want to dive in a little more on this, the liability issue of the statute of limitation changes that a lot of states have enacted. So starting 2020 to 2022, there were a number of states that either opened up a window or did away with the statute of limitations altogether for bringing lawsuits of sexual abuse specifically. And so during that time, 22, 23 to 25, a lot of claims came into carriers um, from situations, a lot of them at churches specifically, where there were allegations of abuse that happened even as far back as the 80s, 70s. And so churches and carriers were forced to kind of deal with that and figure out what to do with that. The big question that came from that is if we had an abuse claim that someone's alleging happened at this church in 1985, how do we determine if there was coverage in place at that time? So unless your church was really, really good at record keeping and has their insurance policies from 1985, which I'm guessing most most churches do not. There's insurance archaeology firms out there that actually uh, can be hired to track down policies from decades ago. So throughout this process, the industry has kind of seen how this plays out, and so there's been a lot of coverage uncovered that from 30, 40 years ago from carriers that were um, on those policies at that time. The other challenge is that uh, an insurance company that may have been on a church's policy in 1985 might not even exist anymore. So, there's other challenges with that as well. Okay, next, I'd like to talk a little bit about another risk issue, and that's outside groups using church space. So this really came to the forefront a few years ago when the Boy Scouts of America had their big sexual abuse scandal because many, if not most, Boy Scout troops have historically met in churches. And so after that whole situation kind of hit the fan, a lot of carriers in the church insurance industry um, got really skittish about outside groups that use churches because um, what happens is if there's an incident, for example, with a Boy Scout troop, and it happens at the church, um, the plaintiffs aren't just going to sue the Boy Scout troop; they're going to sue the church because it happened at the church, and so it ends up being the church's liability as well. And so for that reason, carriers started to really tighten up on what outside groups are using these buildings and what are the protocols they have in place from that. And so the impact of that is churches have had to really tighten up their protocols around outside groups using their facilities. Um, Certainly, carriers and agents understand like they don't want outside groups to stop using churches. It's a great use of church space. It's a great way to engage with the community. A lot of churches sit empty, for maybe up to 6 days a week. So can be a great source of revenue. Just needs to be done in a safe and responsible manner. So one of the things churches can do is certainly have everyone sign indemnification waivers, hold harmless agreements. So anyone, whether it's an official organization or group or just individuals coming in to use the basketball court or something for just a small group of people, have them sign those indemnification waivers. If it is an official group like a Boy Scout troop or AA or NA or anything to that effect, ask them for proof of insurance, make sure they have their own insurance policy, and certainly we want the church to be listed as an additional insured on that policy to ensure that they're covered. And then if resources allow, safety and security measures, um, if you have big events at the church from outside groups, having a security person there, having cameras installed, like I said, if resources allow, making sure all the doors have that glass window in them, so there's nothing that can happen behind, closed doors that's not observable. Those are all things that would help reduce the church's liability.
Hey Bjorn, before you go on, there
Sure.
was a situation that I had come up that somebody was asking. They feed the homeless in their church building, and they got dropped by their coverage. That may have just been an excuse, but that feels like that kind of fits in some of the ways in which might be unique to churches that they use their space, like serving their community in that way, particularly serving the homeless. Could you speak into that a little more on both uh, how, like, what the insurance, like what's happening behind the scenes that would be helpful for church leaders to know about issues like that?
hmm Yeah, I mean, the from an insurance company standpoint, like the companies that really are in the church insurance industry know the kind of ministries that churches have going on, So homeless ministry um, isn't a unique thing in a church world. So a lot of times if a carrier drops a church because of that, it's because they're not comfortable with the exposure. So they're not really maybe a carrier that should be
Yeah.
insuring churches. But the ones that do, they really just want to see that the churches have the right protocols in place, So um, maybe they have a safety team member there. If they have like a homeless sheltering ministry in the winter, like a thermal shelter, they just want to see that they're properly staffed. They have the right procedures in place for getting people in and out, serving food, that type of thing. But yeah, I mean, when I have when I have seen carriers drop or non-renew a church for that kind of thing, usually it's just because they haven't seen it before and they're not comfortable with it. Or like you said, they might be using that as an excuse for some other thing they're not comfortable with.
Yeah. Could you, and stop me if maybe you're going to talk about it more later on, but like I know schools are a big thing too. If a church has a preschool or something like that, what's helpful in that and how that part of the building gets utilized?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually have a client who's going through this right now. They're in the process of finalizing a lease for an outside preschool to use their building during the week. And we've been working with them to develop standards of coverage that they would like the preschool to carry. And so certainly want to make sure that, the if it is an outside preschool not affiliated with the church or an outside school, certainly want to make sure that they have certain standards of coverage that they're having, the general liability, the abuse and molestation, umbrella coverage, and listing the church as an additional insured on that. If it's a ministry of the church, whether it's a preschool or school. Um, yeah, again, certain standards of coverage that they would want to have. Certainly a high abuse limit just because the exposure is higher there. Want to make sure you have a good umbrella policy, that kind of thing. And then as far as the risk management goes for that, a lot more procedures and protocols that could be utilized and should be utilized as far as training for the teachers and volunteers. Certainly robust background and reference checks that would need to be followed and all that kind of stuff. Did that answer your question, right?
No, yeah, I think that's really helpful. So, just as a reminder, if you got other questions, feel free to use that chat to drop them in there. But yeah, thanks for letting me interject a little bit.
Yeah, no, thank you. Um, so yeah, I all this stuff that I've talked about, is great information for leaders, but there's a lot of places that church leaders can go to for this kind of information. Certainly, your agency, they'll be able to help with risk management audits, development of risk management policies and procedures. Sometimes can provide training for your employees or volunteers. The insurance carrier themselves often, almost always, have discounted background checks, online trainings for staff and volunteers, and can help with sample policies and procedures. And then certainly other churches, whether you're part of a denomination or network or just churches in your area. I'm sure a lot of them have asked the same questions, so they can help with benchmarking and sharing best practices and what has and has not worked for them. I appreciate your time and attention. I'd like to open it up to any questions or comments that you might have now.
Thanks, Bjorn. I was a little trigger happy in
No, I'm
just
glad you
hearing you guys
interjected.
asking questions. Yeah. Don't feel if you have a question and you just want to jump on, we can do that too. Alan, thanks for your question. Are safety security policies separate from general liability policy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as far as like an insurance policy, they can be included in the general liability or they can be separate. So, like I said, depending on the insurance carrier, a lot of the carriers will just be what's called silent on safety and security teams. So they won't say they're covering them, they won't say they're excluding them. And so that really comes down to at the time of a claim how they're going to interpret the policy. Some carriers have a specific rider that they'll put on the policy for security teams. And then some carriers will put a specific exclusion on the policy for safety and security teams. So they're saying, hey, we're not going to cover anything having to do with this security team. In that instance, there are companies that write standalone policies that would be separate from the general liability for a safety and security team. So there's sometimes they're called active shooter, active assailant policy. And whether it's called an active shooter policy or not, it's intended to cover really anything that a security team would be responding to. So whether it's just a disruptive individual um, that they're dealing with, or someone that's there to do harm, it would intend to cover the security team for acting on that.
That's good to know. I would assume that would also be where like concealed carry sort of um, components of that would fit in as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, certain carriers, if they know that the security team is armed, they'll put a specific exclusion on the policy for that just because they're not comfortable with that and they see that as increasing the liability. So in that instance, yeah, there's separate policies that can be written to bridge that gap. Mhm. Thanks for that question, Alan. That's a good question.
Thanks, Alan. Did that answer your question? Feel free to hop on and ask if you got a follow up or anybody else have a question. Great. Very good. Well, if you do have one that comes up, we would love to be able to facilitate that. I am going to drop a link in the chat right now that is to the Biz Savers Hub for us through Spire. So um, if you've got a situation you want to walk through with Bjorn and their team to see what options you might have in figuring out your solutions and that sort of thing, go to spire.bizsavershub.com. So again, that's spire.bizsavershub.com. And if you schedule a time with the BizSavers team, you'll be able to get $100 off a conference registration. So we want to be able to thank you for taking that time to do that and give you $100 off a conference registration when you schedule a meeting. So Alan, follow-up question here for you. Asks, how many churches are you working with in California? And maybe if you could, just a general, you said you're in all 50 states, what that looks like state to state, to not put you on the spot too much.
Yeah, I wish I had that number to rattle off, but I don't know that number off the top of my head. I know we work with a number of churches in California. I'm just not sure the exact number. Yeah, we do work in all 50 states, some states more than others. We don't do a lot in Alaska or Hawaii. But yeah, we're in all the states. We're headquartered in Leesburg, Virginia, so we have a lot of clients in Virginia and the surrounding areas, but have worked with certain groups that have brought in clients from a lot of different areas too.
Nice. Nice. Very good. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Bjorn, I give you any closing thoughts you want to send everybody away with?
No, I appreciate everyone being on today. It was an honor to be here. It was Yeah, this was great. Thank you, Chaz, for setting this up, and appreciate you all having me.
No, it's my pleasure, and thanks for what you guys do. I'll follow up with a replay from all of this, and feel free to reach out to me at Chaz Robbins at Spire.network if you got any questions or if there's anything I can help with. We're looking forward. Hopefully, you're able to join us in September 29th through October 1st in Indianapolis this year for the Spire Conference. Our theme is going to be bold and beautiful, and we've got a great lineup in store. course. So thanks again for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful Thursday, and we'll see you later.